Gate 47 scanned 12 boarding passes at 11:23 p.m. The terminal cameras recorded 11 people approaching the jet bridge. I know that because I spent 3 hours in a windowless room counting heads on playback, frame by frame, while my supervisor, Della stood behind me, drinking cold coffee and asking, in a very flat voice, if I was sure I'd hit the right timestamp. I hit it again. I hit it 5 times. The boarding pass log said 12. The biometric gate said 12. The airline's manifest said 12. The cameras, all 4 of them at that gate, every angle the contractor had mounted in the last refit, said 11. And the flight, a regional out of Terminal 5 to a small city I will not name here, took off at 11:47 p.m. with a passenger count nobody could agree on, into a sky that didn't seem to mind one way or the other. My name doesn't matter for this. I work nights for a private firm that contracts security camera maintenance and feed verification at JFK. We're not TSA, we're not Port Authority, we're the people who get called when a camera goes dark, when a feed lags, when a recording hiccups during an incident, and someone needs to know whether it's a hardware fault or a network fault, or, in rare cases, whether the footage was tampered with. Most nights I sit in a back room near the cargo apron and watch 16 monitors at once, drinking the kind of vending machine coffee that tastes like pennies, waiting for a red light to come on somewhere in the system so I can radio a tech to go check it. It's not glamorous work, it pays okay. The benefits are good. My wife likes that I'm home in the mornings before our daughter goes to school, and she likes that I don't have to fly anywhere myself, because she doesn't trust airplanes, and she never has, and after that night I understand why a little better than I used to. I started this job 4 years ago. Before that I did the same thing for a hospital chain in northern New Jersey, and before that I was a regular building engineer at a public school, fixing boilers and replacing fluorescent ballasts, and trying not to fall asleep during professional development meetings. I'm not a young man anymore. My back hurts when it rains. I take medication for blood pressure. I tell you all this so you understand that when I say something happened that I can't explain, I'm not a kid making it up to scare his friends. I'm a tired person with a mortgage and a daughter in middle school, and I'd rather not be writing this at all. The night it started was a Tuesday in late October. The kind of Tuesday where the airport runs on autopilot, half the gates dark, the cleaning crews moving in slow circuits with their floor buffers, the announcements echoing into mostly empty corridors. JFK never really sleeps, but Tuesday after 11 is the closest it gets. I came on shift at 10. I logged into the verification console. I checked the night roster. There were 2 of us in the room, me and a younger guy named Marcus, who'd been hired 6 months earlier and still asked too many questions. Marcus was decent. He didn't smell like cigarettes, and he brought his own coffee in a thermos, which I respected. The first thing I noticed wasn't the gate count. It was the gate itself. Gate 47 wasn't supposed to be active that night. I had the schedule pulled up on my second monitor, the one I use for cross-reference, and Gate 47 was marked dark. No flights, no crew. The little gray bar next to it on the schedule said, offline, maintenance. I'd seen that bar most nights for the last 2 weeks because they'd been doing some kind of refit on the jet bridge mechanism, replacing the hydraulic seals or something, and the airline that normally used 47 had been bumped down to 45 and 46. So when a boarding scan pinged from Gate 47 at 11:23 p.m., it caught my eye the way an unfamiliar engine noise catches a mechanic's ear. I almost let it go. I almost wrote it off as a bad sensor or a stray scan from a maintenance worker swiping a test card. We get those. The gate readers are sensitive, And sometimes, during a refit, a tech will accidentally trigger one with a calibration tool. I leaned back in my chair and was about to mark it as a probable false positive when a second scan came through, then a third, then 9 more in the space of about 90 seconds, all from gate 47, all reading as valid boarding passes, all cleared by the airline's manifest system. "Marcus," I said, "look at 47. He rolled his chair over. He squinted. He's got bad eyes for a guy his age, but he refuses to wear glasses on shift. "That's offline." "Yeah." "That's 12 scans." "Yeah." We sat there for a second. The room was quiet except for the hum of the server rack and the ventilation pushing dry air down from the ceiling. I pulled up the camera feeds for gate 47. There are 4 of them, one above the gate counter, one at the jet bridge entrance, one at the seating area, and one at the corridor approach where passengers walk in from the main terminal. I rewound all 4 to 11:20 p.m. and let them play forward at normal speed. The corridor approach showed 11 people. I counted them. I counted them again. I counted them a third time because I didn't trust myself the first 2 times. 11 adults walking down the corridor toward gate 47 in a loose group, the way people do when they've been waiting at a gate together for a delayed boarding call. None of them were talking to each other. That's the part I keep coming back to. 11 strangers, all moving at the same pace, none of them on phones, none of them looking at each other, all of them facing forward. The gate counter camera showed the same 11 approaching the reader. The seating area camera, which had been empty before the corridor approach, didn't show much except the back of the gate agent's head and the empty chairs. The jet bridge entrance camera showed 11 people walking down the bridge and out of frame. 11, Marcus said. Yeah. But the scanner says 12. Yeah. I checked the scanner log directly. 12 unique boarding passes, 12 unique seat assignments, 12 names. I cross-referenced the names with the airline's manifest. All 12 were on the flight. All 12 had checked bags listed. All 12 had paid for their tickets in the last 72 hours. The flight took off at 11:47 p.m. with 12 souls on board, according to every system that mattered, and 11 people, according to every camera I had access to. I told Marcus to keep watching the rest of the gates. I went and got Della. Della Hooks is a woman in her 50s who's worked airport security in various capacities for almost 3 decades. She was a baggage screener when she started, then a supervisor. Then she crossed over to the contractor side because the pay was better and the politics were less stupid. She doesn't get excited about much. When I told her what I'd found, she didn't get excited either. She just put on her jacket and walked back to my room with me and watched the playback 4 times in silence. Then she asked me if I'd hit the right timestamp. I said yes. She asked me again. I said yes. She watched it a 5th time. Then she said, very quietly, "Don't put that in the report." I looked at her. She was not joking. Her face had the look of a person who's about to say something they'd rather not say and is trying to figure out how to say it without committing themselves to it. "What do you mean, don't put it in the report?" "I mean, write it up as a sensor anomaly at gate 47. Note the maintenance status. Flag it for the morning crew. Don't mention the camera count. Della, the manifest says 12. The cameras say 11. That's not a sensor anomaly, that's a..." "I know what it is," she said. "Write it up as a sensor anomaly." She left the room. Marcus pretended he hadn't been listening. I sat with my hands on the keyboard for another minute, and then I did what she said, because I have a daughter in middle school and a mortgage. And I'd been at this firm for 4 years, and I knew what kind of supervisor Della was, which was the kind who didn't ask twice. I wrote it up as a sensor anomaly. I flagged the gate for the morning. I closed the ticket. Then I went home and didn't sleep. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and watched my daughter pour cereal into a bowl that was slightly too small for it, and I tried to think of normal explanations. The cameras could have had a frame drop. The corridor camera covers a wide angle, and a small person could have been blocked by a larger one for the duration of the approach. The boarding pass scanner could have double-counted someone, registered the same pass twice with 2 different timestamps. The manifest system could have been out of sync with the actual gate count and just listed a phantom passenger from an earlier flight. These things happen. Systems lie to each other all the time. That's half my job, figuring out which system is lying. But I'd worked this job for 4 years, and I'd never seen a discrepancy this clean. 12 scans, 11 bodies, no frame drops, no double counts, no manifest sync errors that I could find on my own pass through the logs. And the way Della had reacted, the way she'd said, "Don't put that in the report," without even pretending it might be a glitch, that bothered me more than the count itself, because Della doesn't get spooked. Della has stood in a room with a hostage negotiator and not raised her voice. Della had once told me, deadpan, that she'd seen a passenger smuggle a live snake through screening in a thermos, and she didn't even find it interesting. Della Hooks does not say, "Don't put that in the report," about a sensor glitch. That afternoon, I called the firm's main office and asked, casually, who else had worked Gate 47 anomalies in the past. The dispatcher, a woman named Inez, told me she didn't have access to that kind of historical query, and I'd have to talk to operations. I asked her to put me through to operations. She put me on hold for 15 minutes and then told me operations was in a meeting and would call me back. They didn't call me back. I went into work that night and pulled the records myself. I'm not supposed to do deep historical pulls without a ticket number, but the system doesn't really stop you. It just logs that you did it. I figured I'd deal with the audit later if anyone noticed. I searched for sensor anomalies at Gate 47 going back 2 years. I expected to find a handful. I found 43. 43 sensor anomalies at a single gate over 24 months. Every single one logged late at night between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Every single one involving a discrepancy between the boarding scanner and either the camera count or the final manifest. The earliest one I could find was from 26 months ago, before I'd even started at the firm. The most recent one before mine was 3 weeks earlier, written up by a tech I didn't know. A guy whose name on the log was Pell. Same wording on almost all of them. Sensor anomaly, gate flagged for morning maintenance. None of the morning maintenance reports referenced a follow-up. None of them said anything had been found wrong with the scanner. One name appeared on 17 of those 43 anomalies. The same name, different seat numbers. I looked it up in employee records. The person had quit the firm 11 years ago, but the manifest still showed them as not yet boarded. Marcus came in at 10. I showed him the list. He read it twice, and then he said, "That can't be right." It's right. 43? 43 that I can find. There might be more under different ticket categories. Why didn't anybody do anything? I didn't have an answer for that. I was thinking about Della, about the way she'd said, "Don't put that in the report." And I was thinking that maybe people had done something. They'd done exactly what she'd told me to do. They'd written it up as a sensor anomaly and flagged it for the morning and closed the ticket and gone home. 43 times. I wanted to call Pell. I didn't have his number. The firm doesn't keep a public directory. You only get other tech's contact info if you're partnered on a job. I asked Marcus if he knew him. He didn't. I asked the next shift guy, who came in for handover at 6 in the morning, a quiet older tech named Roland, who'd been with the firm longer than anyone else I knew. Roland looked at me for a long second, and then he said, "Pell doesn't work nights anymore." Did he transfer? Something like that. Where to? Roland shrugged. He was packing up his bag, getting ready to go on shift. He said, "Listen, I don't know what you're chasing, but you're going to want to leave it alone. I just want to ask him what he saw at 47. He didn't see anything," Roland said. "That's the thing about 47. Nobody ever sees anything. That's the whole point." He left. I drove home. My wife was already up, making lunches for our daughter. She asked me how my night was. I told her it was fine. I told her there had been a glitch at one of the gates and I'd been chasing it down. She said, "You're gonna drive yourself crazy at that job. You know that, right?" And she kissed me on the side of the head and went to wake our daughter for school. No, that night I went back in and I started keeping my own log, not on the firm system, on a notebook, a cheap composition book I bought at a drugstore on the way to work, the kind with the marbled black and white cover. I wrote down the date and the time and what I'd seen at gate 47. Then I wrote down the 43 previous anomalies, with every detail I could pull from the system, in handwriting because I didn't trust the digital records anymore. It took me most of the shift. Marcus asked me what I was doing, and I told him I was making a personal reference for myself, and he didn't push it. At 11:23 p.m. that night, the scanner at gate 47 pinged again. I want to be very clear about this. The next night, the exact same minute, the scanner at gate 47, a gate that was still flagged offline for maintenance, that had no scheduled flight, that should have been completely dark, registered a boarding pass scan. Then another, 11 scans this time, not 12, 11. In the space of about 90 seconds, 11 boarding passes were read by a scanner that wasn't supposed to be active, for a flight that didn't exist, by passengers who, when I pulled up the corridor camera, were not there. The corridor was empty. All 4 cameras showed an empty gate area. No people, no movement. Just the faint flicker of the overhead fluorescents and the long shadows of the empty seating rows. I checked the airline's manifest system. There was no flight assigned to gate 47. There was no manifest. The 11 boarding passes the scanner had read were not in any database I had access to. They had no names, no seat numbers, no destinations. They were just 11 scans, pinged into the void, registered as valid by a system that should have rejected them outright because there was no flight to board. I pulled up the previous night's log. The 12 scans from the night before were still there. So were the manifest entries. So were the names. I cross-referenced them with the airline's flight database, looking for the actual flight that had taken off at 11:47 p.m. with 12 passengers. There was no flight at 11:47 p.m. from gate 47 the night before. There was no flight. The seconds on my monitor kept changing. I didn't move. I went back through the schedule for the previous 24 hours, and there was no record of any flight departing from gate 47. The gate had been offline. The schedule said so. The maintenance log said so. The airline's database said so. The flight I had personally watched 11 people board, that I had personally written up as a sensor anomaly, the flight that had taken off at 11:47 p.m. with 12 people on the manifest. That flight had never existed. But the manifest was still in my system. I was looking at it. 12 names, 12 seat assignments, 12 checked bags. I copied the names down in my notebook. I wasn't sure why. I felt like if I didn't write them down somewhere outside the system, They might not be there in the morning. I want to tell you what one of the names was. I'm not going to tell you the others because I don't think it would be safe to, but I'm going to tell you one. The third name on the list, third row, seat 4B, was my father's name. First, middle, and last. Spelled exactly the way he spelled it, with the unusual middle name that came from his grandfather, the kind of name you don't see twice in a lifetime. My father's been dead for 9 years. He never flew on a commercial airline in his life. He was afraid of flying, the same way my wife is afraid of flying. The same kind of bone-deep refusal to get on a plane that runs in some families and not others. His name was on a manifest for a flight that had never existed, departing from a gate that had been offline, with a passenger count that no camera could confirm. I didn't tell Marcus. I didn't tell Della. I closed the system and I pressed my palm against my forehead and I waited for my shift to end. When Roland came in for handover, I tried to act normal. I gave him the routine briefing. I didn't mention Gate 47. He didn't ask. On my way out, in the parking garage, Roland caught up to me. He must have moved fast for a man his age. He stopped me near my car, and he said, "Did you see your name on it?" I stared at him. "Did you?" he said. "No," I said. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away. Then he said, "When you do, don't go to work that night." He turned and walked back toward the terminal. I stood there in the parking garage for a long time, listening to the wind move through the concrete. I didn't sleep that day either. I sat in my kitchen and I looked at my notebook and I tried to figure out what kind of system, what kind of anomaly, what kind of glitch could put my dead father's name on a manifest for a flight that didn't exist. I came up with 3 rational explanations. The first was that somebody at the airline had a database with old, defunct passenger records, and a malfunction had pulled random names from it to fill out a phantom manifest. Possible, but it didn't explain the matching middle name, which my father had been the only person I'd ever known to use. The second was that someone was messing with me personally, that some tech or supervisor had access to my background and was inserting my father's name as a prank or a test or some kind of psychological operation. Possible, but stupid and impossible to do without leaving a digital footprint I'd be able to find. The third was that my notebook was wrong, that I'd misread the name in my exhaustion and written down something that resembled my father's name, but wasn't. I checked my notebook. The name was right. I went into work that night with the notebook in my back pocket. I told myself I was going to do my job, write up any anomalies the way Della had told me to, and not look at Gate 47. I told myself this several times in the car on the way in. I told myself this while I was clocking in. I told myself this while I was logging into the verification console. At 11 p.m., I pulled up Gate 47 on a side monitor. I told myself I was just going to watch. At 11:23 p.m., the scanner pinged. Then again. Then again. The scans came in a steady rhythm, about every 8 seconds, and I counted them as they registered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 scans this time. I switched to the corridor camera. I watched the live feed. The corridor was empty. No people, no movement. Then, at the edge of the frame, the corner closest to the main terminal, something happened with the light. I don't know how else to describe it. The fluorescence dimmed for a half second, the way they do during a power blip, and then they came back. And when they came back, there was a man standing in the corridor. He had not walked into frame. He had not entered from any visible direction. He was just there, where a moment before there had been nothing, and he was facing the gate. He was wearing a long coat. He was carrying a small bag. He was at the far end of the corridor, and he started to walk slowly toward the gate. I watched him walk. He was a normal-looking man, middle-aged, a little heavy-set, the way a businessman might look at the end of a long travel day. He had thin hair. He had glasses. He did not look at the camera. He did not look at anything in particular. He walked toward the gate at the pace of a man who has done this walk many times and is not in any hurry. Halfway down the corridor, the lights dimmed again. When they came back, there were two more people behind him. They had not walked into frame either. They were just there. This kept happening. Every 20 seconds or so, the lights would dim, and when they came back, there would be more people in the corridor. Never the same way, sometimes in pairs, sometimes alone, sometimes a small cluster of 3 or 4. They all walked toward the gate. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They walked in the same loose group I'd seen the first night, and by the time the last one had appeared, there were 11 of them, plus the man in front, who I realized I'd been counting as the first. 12 total. I switched to the gate counter camera. The 11 were lining up at the scanner, single file, taking turns presenting their boarding passes. I could hear through the audio feed I usually had muted the sound of each pass being read, the little chirp the scanner makes. 11 chirps. Then the 12th. There was no 12th person at the gate counter. The 11th person, a woman in a gray coat, finished scanning her pass and walked through the jet bridge entrance. The line was empty. There was nobody else there. But the scanner chirped a 12th time, and the manifest system on my monitor updated to read 12 passengers boarded. The corridor was empty. The gate was empty. The seating area was empty. The jet bridge was empty, and the system said the flight was full. I switched to the jet bridge camera. The 11 people I'd watched walk down were not on the bridge. The bridge was empty too. They had not exited at the other end. They had not walked back. They were simply not there. The coffee went from warm to room temperature. I hadn't touched it. I think Marcus said something to me. I think I didn't answer. The manifest on my monitor showed 12 names. I read down the list. The 3rd name was still my father's. The 7th name was a name I didn't recognize, and the 8th and the 9th, but the 10th name was mine. First, middle, last. My middle name is unusual. It came from my mother's family. I have only ever met one other person with my middle name, and he was my mother's brother, who died of a heart attack the year before I was born. It is not a name you would find in any random database. It is not a name a prankster would guess. The 10th name on the manifest, seat 14C, was me. I want to tell you that I shut down the system right then. I want to tell you that I called Della. I want to tell you that I did anything sensible at all. What I actually did was stare at the screen for a long time. And then I picked up my notebook and I wrote down all 12 names. And then I wrote the date and the time at the top of the page. And then I went to the bathroom and I splashed water on my face and I looked at myself in the mirror and I tried to remember the last time I had felt this much like a person about to make a bad decision. When I came back, the manifest was gone. The screen was blank. The flight, which had been listed as boarded 1 minute earlier, was no longer in the system. No record of a departure. No record of a manifest. The boarding pass log at gate 47 showed 12 scans, but the scans had no names attached to them anymore. They were just 12 unidentified reads, time-stamped 11:23 p.m. through 11:24 p.m. No manifest, no flight, no destination. I had the names in my notebook. The system did not have them anymore. Marcus came back from his break and asked if anything had happened. I told him no. I told him it had been a slow night. When my shift ended, I walked out to the parking garage and I sat in my car for almost an hour before I drove home. I don't remember what I was thinking about. I think I was just tired. I think I was waiting to feel something other than tired, and it never came. And eventually I started the car and drove home. The next day, I called the firm's main office and asked to speak to operations directly. Inez, the dispatcher, told me operations was unavailable. I asked when they would be available. She said she didn't know. I asked her if she could check whether a tech named Pell was still employed by the firm. She put me on hold. After about 10 minutes, she came back and told me that Pell's employment status was not information she was authorized to share. I asked if there was anybody else I could talk to about it. She said no. I called Della. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail asking her to call me back. She didn't call me back. I went to work that night anyway. I told myself I was going to ignore Gate 47. I told myself I was going to do my job and go home and forget about it and let the firm sort it out, because that's what I was paid to do, and the longer I spent looking at this thing, the worse it was going to get for me personally. I had a daughter in middle school, I had a mortgage, I had a wife who already thought I was going to drive myself crazy at this job. I told myself all of this very firmly, in the parking garage before I went in. When I logged into the verification console, the first thing I saw was a new ticket assigned to me. The ticket number was unfamiliar. The location was Gate 47. The description said, "Verify manifest discrepancy." The timestamp on the ticket was 11:23 p.m. that night. A timer appeared next to it, 0 hours, 23 minutes until event. The ticket had been created 2 hours before the discrepancy it was asking me to verify. I stared at that timer. The system was telling me, 2 hours in advance, that there was going to be a manifest discrepancy at Gate 47 at 11:23 p.m., and that I was going to be the one to verify it. I checked the ticket creation log. The ticket had been created by a user account I didn't recognize. The username was a string of numbers, no name attached. The account had no other tickets in its history. I tried to pull up the account profile and got an error message I'd never seen before. Access restricted system entity. I asked Marcus if he'd ever seen that error. He said no. I asked him if he'd ever heard of a system entity account. He said no. I closed the ticket without verifying it. The ticket reopened itself 30 seconds later. I closed it again. It reopened again. I tried to mark it as a duplicate. The system told me there was no duplicate to reference. I tried to escalate it to a supervisor. The escalation went through and disappeared, and the ticket sat there on my screen, blinking gently, waiting for 11:23 p.m. At 11 p.m., I called Della again. She didn't answer. At 11:15 p.m., I tried to log out of the verification console. The console did not let me log out. The button pressed and released, and nothing happened. I tried to close the application. The application would not close. I tried to lock my workstation. The workstation would not lock. At 11:20 p.m., the corridor camera for Gate 47 came up on my main monitor by itself. I had not selected it. I had not pulled it up. The other monitors continued to show their normal feeds, but the main monitor switched to Gate 47 corridor and would not switch away. At 11:22 p.m., I noticed something I had not noticed before. In the corner of the corridor camera frame, near the bottom right, there is a small reflective surface. It's a piece of polished metal trim around the base of the wall where the carpet meets the molding. It catches the light at certain angles, and most of the time you don't even notice it's there, because the camera angle is wrong for it to reflect anything useful. But that night, at 11:22 p.m., I noticed that the trim was reflecting something it shouldn't have been able to reflect. It was reflecting a row of seats, the seats from inside an aircraft. 12 seats in 2 rows of 6 with their tray tables down. I could see the pattern of the upholstery very clearly. It was an old pattern, the kind I remembered from flying with my father once when I was very small on the only commercial flight he ever took, which I had forgotten about until that exact moment. I had forgotten about it for 35 years. He had taken me to see his sister in Buffalo. He had been so nervous he'd held my hand for the entire flight. He had bought me a bag of pretzels, and he had not eaten his own. He had told me, very quietly, that he was never doing this again. And he hadn't. I had not thought about that flight since I was 6 years old. The trim in the corridor at gate 47 was reflecting the inside of that airplane. At 11:23 p.m., the scanner pinged. The first scan, I watched the corridor, the lights dimmed. When they came back, the man in the long coat was there. He started walking toward the gate. I picked up my radio and I called the gate. I don't know what I was thinking. The gate was supposed to be unstaffed. There was no gate agent. The radio call should have gone to nobody. But somebody answered. "Gate 47, a voice said. I didn't recognize the voice. It was a man's voice, calm, professional, flat. "This is verification," I said. "I need you to confirm staffing at your gate." "Gate 47 is unstaffed," the voice said. "Then who am I talking to?" There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Don't put that in the report." The radio went silent. I tried to call back. There was no response. The frequency was clear. Nobody was there. I watched the corridor camera. The man in the long coat was almost at the gate. The lights dimmed. 2 more people appeared behind him. The lights dimmed again. 3 more. The pattern was the same as the night before, except this time I was watching it knowing that one of them was going to be me. I watched myself appear in the corridor. I want to be clear about this. I watched a man who looked exactly like me. Same coat, same shoes, same way of walking, same way of holding a small bag in his left hand. Appear in the corridor at gate 47 between one flicker of the overhead lights and the next. He was about 1/3 of the way down the corridor. He was facing the gate. He started walking. He did not look at the camera. He did not look at anything in particular. I was sitting in my chair in a windowless room 3 terminals away, watching myself walk down a corridor I had never been in, toward a gate that did not have a flight, to board a plane that did not exist. I picked up the radio again and I called Della. I broke protocol. I used her personal channel. I said her name 3 times. She didn't answer the first 2. The 3rd time, she came on the line. Her voice was tired. "What is it?" "It's me on the camera," I said. "It's me in the corridor." There was a long silence. Then she said, "Are you at your station?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" I looked at my hands. I looked at my desk. I looked at the half-empty cup of coffee. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me from across the room with a worried expression. "I'm at my station," I said. "Then it's not you," Della said. "It looks exactly like me." "It always does," she said. "That's how it works." "How what works?" She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she said, "There's a list, all right. There's a list of people who've worked late nights on gate 47 over the last 26 months. The list has names on it, and the names match the manifests. The manifests don't go anywhere. The flights don't exist. But the names get added, and once a name gets added, the person on the list, they start to drift. They start showing up in places they shouldn't be. On cameras, in old photos, on flight manifests. People who knew them stop being able to remember their faces. The system absorbs them, slowly, over weeks. We don't know why. We don't know how to stop it. We just know that if you look at the list and you see your own name, the only thing you can do is go home and not come back. Roland told me the same thing. Roland's name is on the list, she said. He's been on it for 18 months. He's still here. He's been told to stay close to his routine. As long as he doesn't break pattern, the drift is slow. He'll probably be fine. Probably. I thought about Roland's face. I tried to picture it clearly. I realized I couldn't. I could remember that he was older, that he had gray hair, that he wore the same blue jacket every night. I couldn't remember his eyes. I couldn't remember the shape of his jaw. I had seen him 1,000 times, and I couldn't picture his face. Della, I said. What about the people I watched board the flight the first night? The 11 I saw on camera the first night. They're on the list too. Who are they? Techs, supervisors, a baggage screener, a flight planner who worked here in the 90s, people who were on the list a long time ago. They were boarding. They board every night, sometimes 11, sometimes 12, sometimes the count changes. We've never figured out the rule. Whatever the gate is doing, it's still doing it. We just don't get in its way. You're telling me to go home. I'm telling you to go home and not come back. I'll process your separation paperwork. I'll list it as voluntary. You'll get severance. You'll get a reference. You won't get any answers because there aren't any, and the firm doesn't want this in writing. I looked at my main monitor. The man who looked like me was at the gate counter, presenting his boarding pass. The scanner chirped. He walked through the jet bridge entrance. He did not look back. I'm watching myself board, I said. Then you need to leave, Della said. Right now, get up from your chair and walk out of the building. Don't go back to your car if your car is in the long-term garage. Take a taxi. Go home a different route than you usually take. Sleep at your sister's if you can. Anywhere that isn't on your normal pattern. Break your routine for at least a week. Do not come back to JFK. Do not log into any of our systems. If you do that, you might be able to slow it. I don't know if you can stop it, but you can slow it. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I told Marcus I was going home sick. He didn't ask any questions. I think he could see something in my face. In the parking garage, I didn't go to my car. I walked out the pedestrian exit and stood at the curb and waited for a taxi. I watched the airport from the outside, the great glass facade of the terminal, the lights of the runways in the distance, the planes climbing into the dark. I had worked there for 4 years, and I had never stood outside it and looked at it like that. A taxi came. I got in. I gave the driver an intersection a few blocks from my house. I didn't give him my home address. I didn't know why. I just felt like I shouldn't. When I got home, my wife was awake. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea. She looked up when I came in and she said, "You're home early." "I quit," I said. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. I'll explain in the morning." Okay. She didn't ask any more questions. She made me a cup of tea. We sat at the table together in the quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear the wind moving through the trees outside. I tried to picture Roland's face. I still couldn't. I broke my routine for a week. I stayed at my sister's house in Connecticut for 3 days. I came home and I drove different routes to the grocery store. I didn't go near the airport and I didn't log into anything related to the firm. Della processed my separation paperwork. I got a severance check. I got a reference letter. I started looking for other work. For the first 3 weeks, things seemed okay. I slept badly, but I slept. My daughter noticed I was home more, and she liked it. My wife asked me a few times what had really happened at the job, and I told her parts of it, the parts I thought she could handle, and she listened without interrupting, and at the end, she said, "I always knew there was something wrong with that place." She didn't elaborate. In the 4th week, my driver's license came up for renewal. I went to the DMV. I sat in the plastic chair. I waited my turn. When I got to the counter, the clerk took my old license and entered my information into the computer. She frowned at the screen. She typed something. She frowned again. "Sir, is your middle name spelled correctly on this license?" I looked at the license. My middle name was spelled correctly. It was spelled the way it had always been spelled, the way my mother had spelled it on every birthday card, the way my uncle had spelled it before he died. "Yes," I said. She turned the screen toward me. The DMV's record of my middle name was different. It was a similar name, but not the same. It was spelled with 2 letters changed. It was the kind of name a person might have if they were almost me, but not quite. "That's not right," I said. "It's what we have on file, sir. It's been spelled the other way my whole life." She shrugged. She wasn't unfriendly. She just wasn't interested. She told me I'd have to bring in a birth certificate to correct the record. I told her I would. She printed me a temporary license with the wrong middle name on it. I put it in my wallet. When I got home, I dug out my birth certificate. The name on it was correct, the original spelling. I made a copy. I put it in an envelope to take back to the DMV. That night, when I was getting ready for bed, I looked at the temporary license again. The middle name was now spelled correctly. I checked the birth certificate. It was still correct. I looked at the temporary license a 3rd time. The letters had rearranged while I was standing there. Back to correct. I set it on the nightstand and stared at it until my eyes watered. It didn't change again. I lay in bed for a long time, looking at the ceiling. I thought about Della saying, "The system absorbs them, slowly, over weeks." I thought about Roland's face. I tried to picture my own face. I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was there. It looked like me. I stared at it for a long time and tried to memorize it. The exact shape of my nose, the line of my jaw, the color of my eyes, in case I needed to remember later. The next morning I called the firm. I called Inez. I asked to speak to Della. Inez told me Della Hooks no longer worked for the firm. Since when? I'm not authorized to share that information. Inez, I just talked to her 4 weeks ago. I'm not authorized to share that information, sir. I asked for Roland. Inez told me there was no employee by that name. I asked for Marcus. Inez told me there was no employee by that name. I asked for J. Pell. Same answer. I asked for myself, by name. There was a long pause. Then Inez said, "I have a record of an employee by that name, sir, but that record was closed 26 months ago. I worked there for 4 years. I just left 4 weeks ago. I'm sorry, sir, but our records show otherwise." I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I opened my notebook. The names from the manifest were still there, in my own handwriting. The 3rd name my father's, the 10th name mine. I read down the list. There were 10 other names. Some of them I didn't recognize. Two of them I did. One was Roland's, one was Della's. There was a 12th row at the bottom of the list. I had written it that night, the second night, when there had been 12 names. I read the 12th name. It wasn't a name I recognized at first. Then I looked at it for a long time, and I realized why I knew it. It was my daughter's name. She is 12 years old. She has never flown on a plane. My wife has never let her, and after that, neither will I. Her name is unusual. Her middle name is my mother's name. There is no random database in the world that would generate it. Her name was on a manifest for a flight that never existed, departing from a gate that had been offline, in seat 14D, next to mine. I want to tell you that I did something brave at this point. I want to tell you that I went back to JFK, that I confronted the system, that I broke into gate 47 and ripped out the scanner with my bare hands. I didn't do any of that. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a tired man with a mortgage and a daughter in middle school. I did the only thing I could think of, which was to make sure my daughter did not break her routine. I drove her to school every morning. I picked her up every afternoon. I asked her casually if she had been thinking about flying anywhere lately. She told me no. She told me she still doesn't like the idea of planes. I told her that was good. I told her I didn't either. I started checking the cameras at her school. The school has a parent portal where you can see the live feed from the front entrance. I checked it every morning after I dropped her off, to make sure she was still walking through the doors, to make sure her count was still her count. So far it has been. I check the family photos on our refrigerator every night before bed. So far, her face is still her face. I take new photos of her every week on a small disposable camera I bought, the kind that uses film, the kind that can't be edited or overwritten remotely. I have the film developed at a drugstore. I keep the prints in a shoebox in my closet. They are still her in every one of them. So far, I have not been able to find a job that pays what the firm paid. I work part-time at a hardware store now. The pay is bad, but the hours are predictable, and I am home every night. My wife has gone back to work, which she didn't want to do, but which we needed her to do. We are managing. We are not comfortable, but we are managing. I tried twice to drive past JFK. The first time, I got within a mile and turned around. The second time, I got within half a mile and the GPS in my car rerouted me onto a service road I had never seen before, which curved away from the airport and looped me back onto the highway in the opposite direction. I checked the map afterward. The service road existed. It had always existed according to the map. I had just never noticed it. I have not tried a third time. 3 weeks ago, I got a piece of mail at my house. It was a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. On the paper was a manifest, 12 names, 12 seat assignments, departure time 11:47 p.m., origin gate 47, JFK, destination blank. The third name was my father's. The 10th name was mine. The 12th name was my daughter's. But there was something different this time. Next to the names was a column I hadn't seen before. The column was labeled boarded. For 10 of the names, the column read yes. For the third name, my father's, it read yes. For the 10th name, mine, it read not yet. For the 12th name, my daughter's, it also read not yet. I sat at my kitchen table with that piece of paper for a long time. I read it over and over. I tried to think of what to do with it. I thought about burning it. I thought about taking it to the police. I thought about putting it in the shoebox in my closet with the photos of my daughter. In the end, I put it in the notebook with the marbled black and white cover, in the back pocket inside the rear cover, where I keep the things I don't want to forget, but don't want to look at either. Last night I had a dream that I was standing in a corridor at JFK. I was at the far end, near the main terminal. I was wearing a long coat. I was carrying a small bag. The corridor was empty, except for me. At the other end of the corridor, the gate counter glowed under its single fluorescent. The scanner was waiting. The chairs in the seating area were empty. The jet bridge entrance was open, and I could see down it a little way, just to where it curved out of sight. There was no flight scheduled. There was no gate agent. There was no announcement. But the scanner was waiting, and I was holding a boarding pass in my hand, and I knew that if I looked at the boarding pass, I would see my name on it, and I would see seat 14C, and I would walk down the corridor and present the pass, and the scanner would chirp, and I would walk down the jet bridge and out of sight, and somewhere a camera would be recording, and the camera would only show 11 of us because the 12th one would be me, and the cameras have never been able to confirm me. I woke up before I looked at the boarding pass. I went to my daughter's room and stood in the doorway and watched her sleep for a long time. Her face was still her face. Her name, when I whispered it, was still her name. The light from the hall fell across her pillow, and she did not stir. I have not gone back to work yet. I am taking the day off, which I cannot really afford to do, but which I am doing anyway. I am writing this at my kitchen table while my wife is at work and my daughter is at school. The notebook is open in front of me. The piece of paper from the envelope is still tucked into the back pocket. The shoebox of disposable camera photos is on the table next to my coffee. This morning, when I checked the parent portal for my daughter's school, the feed from the front entrance was running normally. I watched her walk through the doors at 7:52 a.m., the way she does every morning. I counted the kids who walked in around her. I count them every morning now. It's a habit. There were 14 kids in the frame with her, including her. I counted them twice. The school's automated attendance system, which I also have access to through the portal, registered 15 students entering the building during that minute. I closed the portal. I sat at the table. I drank my coffee. After a while, I opened it again. The attendance count had updated. It now read 14. I want to believe that's a glitch. I want to believe the system corrected itself. I want to believe that the count was always 14 and I misread it the first time. The way you misread a number when you're tired. The way you misread a clock at 3 in the morning and think it says something it doesn't. I'm going to pick her up from school today. I'm going to pick her up every day this week. I'm going to keep the disposable camera in my coat pocket. I'm going to take a new photo of her every afternoon, and I'm going to have the film developed at the drugstore, and I'm going to put the prints in the shoebox in my closet. And I'm going to keep checking the count. Because somewhere out there, at a gate that's been flagged offline for the better part of 3 years, in a terminal where the cleaning crews move in slow circuits at night, and the announcements echo into mostly empty corridors, a scanner is still pinging at 11:23 p.m. A manifest is still being filled. The cameras are still showing one fewer person than the system says is there, and the column at the right side of the page, the one labeled boarded, is still updating name by name from not yet to yes. I don't know when my row will change. I don't know when hers will. I don't know if there's anything I can do that will keep them from changing. Della said I could slow it. She didn't say I could stop it. I'm going to keep slowing it for as long as I can. If you work nights anywhere, if you watch cameras, if you read manifests, if you check logs against gauges, against alerts, against the list of names the system says should be there, I want you to do me one favor. I want you to count. I want you to count what you see. And I want you to count what the system tells you is there. And if the two don't match, I want you to write down both numbers in a notebook with a marbled black and white cover, the kind they sell at drugstores. And I want you to keep that notebook somewhere the system can't reach. Because the system is patient. The system has been doing this for a long time. The system does not need you to believe in it. The system just needs you to stop counting. I'm not going to stop counting. Not yet.